Hello, everybody. Thank you for coming. It is a real pleasure to have you, all of you who are here in the room, and also those of you who are following online. I'm Carter Roberts. Nope. Okay, now you can. Hi, I'm Carter Roberts. I'm the president and CEO of World Wildlife Fund, and we are really delighted to have all of you here today in person and also online. We are here today with some of the most impressive leaders in the sustainability space, both from government, private sector. And we're here today to talk about something a little bit different. A lot of eyes this week have been on what is the blueprint for mitigation and climate change from all the different countries gathered here. And what we want to talk about today is what is the blueprint for leadership in moving companies and institutions to make a difference on climate change. So it's very much a bit of a personal conversation about individual leadership, how it works, and how it works in different sectors, and then we'll have some larger reflections on the nature of the world around us. So without further delay, I'm gonna throw a question to our panelists. They thought I was gonna ask a different question up front. I'm not gonna ask that. I'm gonna ask a new one, which is this. I'll give you an example. When the Biden administration, Obama administration was in place, I had Brian Deese join a group of staff, and I asked him, what is the most essential competency you need to make things happen in the White House? And he said, the ability to absorb immense amounts of information and under severe time pressure make decisions and don't look back. And I thought that was really interesting. But I want to ask this question of each of our panelists who are here today because they are impressive. We have Monica Medina, who was just appointed by the Senate and installed as the key person in the State Department to bring together a whole set of issues from environment to sustainability to and all kinds of topics. We also have Katie Fallon, who occupied some amazing roles also in the Obama administration before moving on to the private sector and is now the Chief Impact Officer for McDonald's. We also have Ellen Jakowski from HP, who is the Global Impact Officer there and has done many groundbreaking things at HP and also has a lot of experience with government policy and the like. And last but not least, we have David Hayes, who previously served in the Department of Interior and then was a policy advisor in DC and is now a senior advisor to President Biden on climate change, with a particular focus on the United States. So we're just going to get started. You've had time to think about your answer, and I just want to start with you, Monica, and then work down the line. Just real quick, 1 minute each. What is the critical competency you think emerging leaders need to make a difference in this space?
Oh, am I on? Yes, good. Thank you. Thank you so much, Carter. Thanks for inviting me to be part of this wonderful panel. I think I really would just take what Brian said and take it one step further. It is the ability to absorb lots of information, understand it, and then translate it back to a whole group of people who may not be as climate knowledgeable as the people we work with every day. I just got confirmed, which I'm so glad to be here in Glasgow. I just literally got confirmed about three weeks ago. But before this, I was writing a daily environmental newsletter. And one of the things that we did was look at all the media out there on every issue in the world of environment and boil it down for our readers and explain why it mattered. And every time I talked to somebody about why they liked our newsletter, it was because we explained why it mattered in real terms, in easy terms, in a paragraph, a couple of sentences. So I think communication skills in this day and age are critical. It's important to be able to take in a lot of information because there's so much out there, but it's also important to be able to communicate it back out in ways that people can understand and that help them make a difference.
Great. Thanks. Katie?
Thank you for the question, Carter. It's great to be here with everyone. I've been thinking since you gave the Brian Deese example, having learned a lot from Brian Deese myself, and I would say I think the critical competency is being able to mobilize and influence diverse stakeholders and teams around a vision for the future in a world that's so fast-paced and where there's that short-term gratification, short-term results are dominant. I think in the climate discussion, it's being able to consistently compel a path that will get you outcomes in 5 years, 10 years, 30 years, and inspire teams and diverse stakeholders to stay that course and stay focused on that how decisions made today affect the long term.
Great. Thanks.
And thanks, Carter, for having me here today. To complement the answers so far, I would add just pure grit and determination. I think the challenges that we are facing are so difficult. The answers are not easy. They're not right in front of us, and we need real innovation. And so to get there, just being incredibly determined. There are so many reasons to say, excuses why something won't work, why you can't move forward. And just having that, sense inside of you burning really hard, what are you going to do to get around that obstacle? How are you going to look in a different direction with unusual, maybe more diverse stakeholders than you've worked with before to bring that innovation and those solutions to light?
Great. David?
These are great answers. I agree with all of them. I would say that one of the most important things for a leader is to go deep on issues. Don't just go at the surface. It's really hard in climate because this is an all-sector problem, and there's so many dimensions, and you can't know it all. But pick some areas where you're going to go deep and be able to communicate with the experts and then translate that. And that's the other piece of it is to work on the communication skills. I was raised as a lawyer, and you might think lawyers know how to communicate. They have no idea how to communicate. Maybe to a judge, but not to a normal person. And so think about the comms piece of it. So it's very much a dichotomy. You've got to go deep. I think you want to be somewhat of an expert, but you also have to speak, just like my colleagues up here said, you need to speak in ways that are understandable to broad audiences.
That is all great. Your collective responses remind me of a conversation I recently had with a group of university students when they asked for advice, and I said, just take the Sustainable Development Goals, pick one. Actually, pick a sub-goal. There are 19 goals. There are 160, 170 sub-goals. Pick one, own it, know it, and just get after it with a vengeance and build the coalitions you need to do that. So I love your answers. It's kind of the combination of hard and soft skills. And I love also the emphasis on grit, because you gotta know you're gonna win at the end of the day to get through it all. So I want to ask each one of you an individual question, and I'm going to start at that end. And David, you've confirmed to lead the team and to be an advisor to the president on climate change with a focus on the United States in particular. And as you think about messaging and when you come back home, what is the message that you would hope for us to be able to deliver to the United States back home about what happened here in the COP and why that matters?
So I'm a part of Gina McCarthy's team in the White House, the Climate Policy Office, and we are very focused on the president's agenda and making this decisive decade really important. And while we're all focusing on 2030 and 2050, we're really focusing on the next 2 years, the next 4 years, certainly to 2030. What I find it inspiring to be here, because the message back to Washington is, and to the president, we're doing the right thing. Mr. President, you're doing the right thing by making climate one of your 4 top priorities. And the world is with us, and we have the opportunity, I think, to show the way in the U.S. and to show it can be done. And we're coming off of 4 years where we've not had that happen, and we're going to try to make up for lost time, and we are already. And I'm excited about that. I think that the COP messaging, I know the president had a wonderful 2 days here, reinforced things and that commitment. What the other thing is, this COP is focused on issues that differ from previous COPs to my extent, from my perspective. One is it's very specific. On the one hand, look at this methane pledge, for example, which is meaningful, is near term, and fits right into what the U.S. is doing and trying to do globally. And we have 100 countries involved in that. Number two, look at adaptation, which has never been a serious COP issue. And it's an area of WWF expertise, the importance of nature-based solutions, of resilient forests, of land sinks. And this is something that speaks to the world, but it speaks to the U.S. as well, and it's an important part of our NDC. So these messages are wonderful to bring back to Washington.
Great, thanks, David. I want to talk to you, since you're part of the negotiating team, and I was talking to someone recently this morning, Manuel Pulgar Vidal, who led the COP in Peru and is now the head of our climate program, who said, it used to be the heads of state came in at the end after all the negotiations had happened, and some of the lessons learned along the way, it's better to have them come at the beginning, set the table, send them out, let the negotiators work through the details of how things are going to work, build the coalitions, move things forward. And I just wanted to ask you, what does success look like at the end of the 2 weeks here in Glasgow for you and for the U.S. delegation?
Thanks for that question. It's a good one. I think we had 3 goals in mind for this particular COP. One, to really demonstrate that the U.S. is back, that we are here, we are engaged, and we have solutions that we are wanting to share and to work with other countries, to be a good partner again with a lot of other countries, from adaptation to mitigation, that we have things to say. And I will say that we have 13 cabinet secretaries. David talked about a whole of government approach. We have 13 cabinet secretaries plus the president who are here, and they are staggered throughout the 2 weeks. So you'll be seeing American leaders here for the entire time of the COP, and we will be making more announcements every day that will tie to different themes, different areas of work that we're working on, and that appeal to different countries or different sectors. So we are here, and my job is to actually be here as much as possible, to be out in this particular venue, visiting with other countries in their pavilions, visiting with NGOs, making sure that we're doing the kind of outreach and listening, which is another critical skill for leaders, that we're listening and hearing what people have to say. Our second goal is obviously to try to keep us on the path to 1.5, and everything that we're doing is working towards that. That methane pledge is an example of how we took something that we were doing at home and thought, well, how can we take that global? And sure enough, we got more than 100 countries to sign up to be part of it, which is a great way of building momentum. The third thing we're trying to do is get the rules right, and I know that's sort of a lawyerly thing. I'm a lawyer too. But the rules matter because they will incentivize the way people behave going forward, and we have to make that pivot now. We're in this 10 years. So getting the rule book set is our third goal, and I think we have a team of, I don't know how many, dozens of negotiators. They're in almost every session, or in every session. Many are leading the sessions. So hopefully we'll get a good rule book done, and we'll have a wonderful agreement and a lot to celebrate at the end.
Great, thanks. All right, I'm going to turn to Katie. Katie, I clearly have done something wrong in my career that I haven't spent time in government. You too worked with President Obama and led a lot of the legislative affairs work. and the engagement of Congress around big strategies. And now you've been the Chief Impact Officer at Hilton and McDonald's. And at McDonald's, you guys have just doubled down with a big net zero commitment, and also increasing your science-based target commitments to get to 1.5 degrees C. It's a amazing company with amazing reach, but I just want to say, you know, I think as most people think about climate leadership, they think about government officials, they think about NGOs, but their first instinct is not necessarily to think about companies, and yet we all know that companies play such an enormous role in getting to where we need to go. So can you just talk about McDonald's and why is this issue so important to you?
Absolutely, Carter. And I was right there along with most people in thinking that. And I spent most of my career in public service because of it, working on climate change issues in the Senate and then in the Obama White House alongside Monica and David. But it wasn't until I transitioned to the corporate world that I realized the full potential of being able to maximize large multinational supply chains and consumer purchasing bases to catalyze, you know, sectoral change. And at McDonald's, in both Hilton and the McDonald's context, partnering with organizations like WWF to help us get there and to realize and measure that progress. At McDonald's, we're in 120 countries and territories around the world. We serve 65 million customers a day. We operate the largest real estate portfolio, second to the Vatican, in the world, and we, are operating one of the largest food supply chains in the world. And so, when we start filtering decisions through the filter of wanting to protect the planet, we can be a massive catalyst for change. And I sort of inherited that long held integration of that filter in the McDonald's system. 20 years ago, McDonald's worked with Conservation International to establish the protocols for sustainable fishing because the fillet of fish was taking off on menus everywhere. And so now, the entire industry is a beneficiary of that partnership with Conservation International. And in 2014, we set goals with WWF's help on sustainable sourcing across all our core menu items: beef, chicken, soy, palm oil, and we've substantially reached all those targets in 2020. And now we're trying to catalyze material innovation across the packaging supply chain. So we have set a public target that 100% of our packaging across all of our restaurants is going to be from sustainable certified recycled content by 2025. And so, when we set these public goals, we're holding ourselves accountable to meeting them. We have to report that progress and accountability to our shareholders, and the potential is vast for us to be making a difference. But I ran into a former Obama colleague just a few minutes before this panel, and we were both commenting, he's in the private sector too now, about we wish we would have done this before going into the White House, because there's so many opportunities that you think about and you realize that could be achieved through that public-private partnership and collaboration. And David and I were just talking about one of them that we're going to hopefully pursue soon. So I'm greatly benefiting from that experience in government, but I'm hoping to bring my experience in the corporate world back into that conversation in meaningful ways.
Great, thank you. Okay, over to Ellen. Just by way of information, HP is an amazing company. It was the first global tech company to publish its full carbon footprint, to set carbon emissions reduction goals for operations, supply chains, and its products. And as Chief Impact Officer of this company that's won so many awards on this front, you've recently done some amazing things on thinking about how you compensate for the use of paper in your products, thinking way beyond the products themselves, but also to how they are used. In addition to some other really cool things like building computers out of ocean plastic that I love. So could you just talk about the really innovative things you've been doing recently, which, by the way, is a not so subtle invitation to share some news about work with WWF?
Sure. So at HP, we've recently set some of the industry's most comprehensive and ambitious targets around climate action. And as part of that, this goes back to actions that we've been building up towards for many, many years. When we think about the relationship that HP in particular has to forests, we make printers, right? And printers, of course, use quite a bit of paper, especially at the scale that HP makes and produces those printers. So first, several years ago, we started to tackle HP branded paper and making sure that we were taking care of our own footprint, our own products first, and ensuring that HP branded paper is certified by FSC or another recognized source or is made from recycled content in a way that contributes to zero deforestation. So took care of our own house first. Then in thinking about where do we go next, how do we raise the bar for ourselves and our industry, it so happens, if you happen to own an HP printer, most of our customers don't purchase HP branded paper to run through their printer. So we recognized a responsibility to go beyond our own footprint. How do we help affect change across the entire paper industry so that all printing with HP, whether you choose HP branded paper or not, eliminates or counteracts efforts of deforestation. So that led us to a partnership several years ago that we started with WWF to counteract deforestation in our consumer printing. So we entered into 2 projects, one in Brazil and one in China, to do just that, going beyond our own paper footprint to take care of the other brands of paper that our customers are choosing. And then recently, just a week ago, we announced an expanded partnership with WWF, $80 million to take care of the full footprint of all non-HP branded paper. So not just in our consumer printing, but also in commercial and industrial. So I think for us, this really just points to, how do we affect systemic change in industry? And Carter, you mentioned what we're doing on plastics as well, and we can have a similar example about how we've started an effort within the company and then looked to scale beyond our own supply chain, how we offer those solutions to others in the industry. And I think that's key here. Once we've found a solution, how do we open source it? How do we make it available? How do we go beyond? How do we bring the whole industry and others with us? And that's what we're aiming to do at HP. Great,
thank you. All right, I'm going to go back to personal leadership advice and stories. And in particular, I think all of us know that there are certain moments in our careers where there has been a really difficult choice you had to make that made it made a difference in your life, but it also taught you a lot about leadership. And I want to go down the line, and I'm gonna start with Katie. But I just want you each to this sounds like an interview, right? Where you get these strange questions. Well, what is a hard decision, really hard one you had to make that was pivotal in your career and your understanding of what leadership really means?
This is a really good question. There's been a lot of them, but I'll bring up something that's highly relevant to the debates happening in Congress today, and that was negotiations in 2015 with Brian Deese on securing a big budget deal in a very, very polarized Congress, where we had to make very unpopular trade-offs to get it across the finish line, but at the end of the day, the trade-offs that we made still represented progress, and so that was the point that we had to drive home, was that we're not getting everything that we set out to get in this deal, but we're driving progress. This is a down payment on progress, and I think in the climate conversation, it tends to fall into sort of black and white media coverage. Either you succeed or don't succeed. When climate is, the climate conversation all has to be rooted in our ability to continue to make progress and accelerate that progress, but continue to make progress. There are no sort of perfect answers or perfect solutions because we're sort of testing and learning and failing and starting again. But it necessitates us being willing to make those, trade-offs in our decision making. And that's something that that we have to particularly internalize at McDonald's when we're working with this vast system of suppliers and partners around the world. Some in markets that are able to be accelerating innovations in this space, some which don't have the tools and capabilities to do that. So what trade-offs will we allow to continue to make progress across our vast supply chain globally?
Right. Thank you. It reminds me of a family mantra that we have in my family, which is better is better. and that's great advice. Ellen.
Yeah, so I think this goes back to what I started to talk about at the beginning, that grit. Some of the decisions that we made early on with the ocean-bound plastic work that you mentioned in our PCs, there was very risky decision about where could we be sourcing some of this plastic from, and we chose a location, Haiti. In that decision, there's a lot of risk. Who would decide to expand their supply chain into Haiti, right? This is a location where there are earthquakes, there are hurricanes, there's political unrest, there was an assassination recently, there's now gang violence at extreme levels that the country hasn't seen. So does it seem like the obvious solution to go start, an aspect of your supply chain in a location like that? But the opportunity to create the change and prove that if we could do something like this in Haiti, start sourcing plastic from the ocean, helping prevent it from getting in there in the first place, providing livable wage jobs, helping to stand up a part of the economy, create stable economic opportunity there. It just seemed like, how could we not try it? And presenting that, to our leadership team and trying to get buy-in of our chief supply chain officer to do something like that was, kind of scary, right? Like, they're going to look at me like you're crazy to even think about doing this. But that was in 2016. We've now scaled the operation. We've used more than 85 million plastic bottles upcycled into HP products. We now have more than 160 products that include that material. And it's a beacon, it's a story for our own employees to really galvanize their passion, their excitement, their pride in our company, their interest in finding innovative solutions that are in the most unsuspecting places. And it's just a great example, I think, for so many people. And we've been able to scale it across to even some of our competitors and others across other industries. So taking that risk and being brave, even when it seems like, why would you want to do something like that? It pays off sometimes.
Great. Thank you. David.
So I think one of the hardest things as a leader and decision maker is to know when to compromise and when to say, no, we can't do that, because you have the potential to lose everything when you go that second route. But you also have the potential to really not do nearly as much as you can if you compromise too early. I'll give one quick example. I was the Deputy Secretary of the Interior trying to save the Headwaters Forest in Northern California in 1999. And Congress had appropriated $250 million to buy this was the largest old-growth redwood forest in the United States. Had authorized $250 million to buy it. But Charles Hurwitz, who was a famous raider, was the owner of this entire huge forest, a portion of which was going to be bought by the government. But he and Pacific Lumber had the rest of it, 200,000 acres, and he wanted to do a habitat conservation plan and make sure he could do enough logging to make ends meet. And we got up to a week before there was a deadline of midnight, February 1, 1999, and he had gone to the president, President Clinton. He had said, I have to make this work for me, whatever, you've got to make this habitat conservation work for us. And we decided a week before the deadline, no, we're walking away. We're not going to do this. And then 48 hours before the deadline, Charles Hurwitz called me up and said, let's do this. And we did. But we did it, we had to do it by midnight. So we decided Congress met midnight Pacific time. And we did it at 3 in the morning. And it required me a call at 2 a.m. to Dianne Feinstein to get her out of bed to close the deal with the state of California and the new governor. But we got it. But if we had compromised on that habitat conservation plan, which was going to save the salmon that were affected by that logging, we never would have gotten it. So that was a hard decision. I learned that from Bruce Babbitt. You have to know when to walk away and just let it scramble and and then you can sometimes make the leap.
Yeah, great, thank you. I've got a Bruce Babbitt story to tell too, but I want to hear from Monica first.
Well, it's a great question, and I think building on all these wonderful answers, I would say that it's most important to just believe, to just follow your gut and believe. And I worked with David actually on that Headwaters project, and the woman who actually was driving a lot of it, there were two, Dianne Feinstein, who was determined that we come together and figure out a solution, and a woman named Julia Butterfly, who was in a tree, in a redwood tree, for months, determined that we come up with a solution. And so I think, you know, from us in the government side, sometimes it's hard. We see advocates out there pushing us harder and farther, and it's hard to keep going when you see all that criticism. But I think it's important for the advocacy community to keep pushing us harder and keep pushing us farther, and for us in the government and in companies to take that on and try and meet that moment and believe and not give up. So.
Can I tell you my Bruce Babbitt? When I first had this job, Bruce Babbitt was on our board, and he came up to me and he said, "Carter, I just have a little bit of advice for you. Just pick 3 things that you care about and let the rest of it wash over you, because you need things that you own and make sure they get done, and then let other people pick up the rest." That you from going crazy at night trying to solve all the problems in your head at once. So I loved how you started off with 3 objectives for this COP, and I think that's immensely helpful. Okay, I'm going to drop a question and go to one that I really like, which is often we in the environmental community get dinged for only talking about ourselves, not sharing credit with others, and not acknowledging the work of others, and particularly the role that other people's work plays in inspiring us. So I'm going to revise the question a little bit and just ask each one of you, and David, I'm going to ask you to start again. Can you provide an example of somebody in another institution that they did something in a way, or they accomplished something that inspired you to do a lot more in your work than you might have done otherwise?
Yes. So just before I took this job, I was working with state attorneys general. We had a center at NYU that was working with progressive state AGs to fight back against the Trump rollbacks. And I was inspired not by a single AG, but by several. Maura Healey in Massachusetts, Tish James in New York, Brian Frosch in Maryland, and Javier Becerra in California. This was not familiar territory for state attorneys general. These are the state legal officials who typically don't get involved in national things. But they said climate is one of our top priorities, and we're going to sue the hell out of the Trump administration and try to stop all the bad things while we protect our state prerogatives to move forward. And every one of those in each of those states were tremendously responsible for stopping some of the worst of the rollbacks. And it was a great window for me, and pertinent here to the COP, to remember how important state government is, local government is, and how these other actors in civil society at different levels of government are incredibly influential.
That's great. Okay, Monica, what about you?
So there are several people who've inspired me, but not in my institution, through me for a minute. I think the person who's inspired me the most for this particular purpose is someone I worked with at the National Geographic Society, Dr. Enrique Sala, who said he was tired of writing the obituary of the ocean and he wanted to go fix it. And so he set out to conserve the last wild places in the ocean, and now he's expanded that to on land. And I thought, what a crazy big dream. But it's working. I mean, he's done amazing work, and it's helped to build a movement that is now the 30 by 30 movement. So I think dream big, Enrique Sala and other scientists who inspire the work that we do. That's who I would who's inspired me.
That's great. I had the chance to take the train back from New York to D.C. with Enrique Sala after the UN General Assembly, and I said to him, "What's your playbook?" And he laid it out, and it is all about understanding the psychology of heads of state and getting them to fall in love with a place, to understand that a place is threatened, and then to wait, to pause, and wait for the head of state to say, well, what do I do about it? And then to have the answer, and then to make that individual a hero. And it was really a genius playbook, and one that I have personally copied.
He's perfected the art, and they did a big announcement here yesterday between the governments of Ecuador, Colombia, Costa Rica, and Panama, creating the largest contiguous, multi-country marine protected area in the world. It was wonderful.
Yep. Katie.
Well, this is going to sound incredibly self-serving, and I'm not trying to have you get me into any parties here, but I think my answer is you, Carter. I think it's, and thinking about it, you know, I've changed jobs. Everyone in this stage has been in different roles, but one thing has been sort of constant in this conversation, and that's your sort of perseverance and commitment to this cause, and your sort of partnership, but also your, insistence in holding everyone that you work with accountable to delivering. From the couches of the White House to the Blue Zone at COP. I think that so much progress that we've been making is attributable to WWF and pushing its partners to do the hard stuff and figure out a path forward. Our regenerative agricultural pilot that you've initiated with Cargill and Walmart and McDonald's in the Northern Great Plains, you're bringing together, unexpected allies on a really tough issue, and around beef sustainability, and we're hoping to be able to really use the learnings there to drive real change across that commodity. So I just want to thank you for inspiring all of us.
Good. Did we get that on camera? Is that been filmed with the logo? That is very kind of you. We do have some amazing staff in WWF who have been spectacular at this work, and I'm really proud of them and what they do. So thank you for that, Ellen.
So there's a gentleman named Richardson Antoine. I'm going to go back to the Haiti connection. He is our point person through an organization that we work with called First Mile. He's the organizer on the ground who works with all of the plastic collectors, and his spirit, his kindness, his inclusiveness, his desire to bring the voice of the plastic collectors, up to the biggest global stages, and his ability to do it in such a kind of clear, important way, just inspires me, I think, to take things to the next level. He's just brought such an important perspective, I think, to bear, especially considering many of the audiences where we're all kind of talking to ourselves in our bubble. But he's a clear reminder of the work that we're doing affects real people, real communities, and they need a clear voice in this process as well.
Great, thank you all. Okay, I've got one last question, and it's in the context of this COP, and we all know that we're going to be at this COP. We're not going to get much sleep. We're going to be in all kinds of meetings and watching all kinds of commitments being made. But we're all going to go home, and we're going to immediately get to work and getting stuff done. And Ellen, I wanted to start with you because I know that at HP, accountability is a big deal. You built sustainability into the performance measures of your leadership. You've tied compensation to those performance measures on sustainability. And I just would love for you to reflect on how accountability works within HP and what is the secret sauce in making it a force for follow-through year after year.
Yeah, so I think the point about tying people's compensation to those results is really important and really effective and clearly meaningful. It sends a signal to others, not just within the company, but outside of the company about how seriously we are in terms of achieving our commitments. They're not just big statements that we make one day, but it's really about carving a real, true, actionable pathway to reach those goals and holding yourself accountable and being very transparent about that progress. We report annually in our Sustainable Impact Report all of those metrics. But what we've done lately is it's not just about the compensation of our CEO or the top leadership team, but earlier this year we changed our performance management system so all 53,000 HP employees have the opportunity to set a sustainable impact goal that matches up towards one of our big sustainable impact goals at the corporate level. And I think empowering every single person, whether you're in design and engineering, some of the more common roles that you would think about having some of the levers to help achieve our goals, or if you're in legal or procurement, are you creating contracts that have the right incentives? Are we finding the right partners in our supply chain who can help us achieve these goals? If you're in marketing, are you communicating our features and benefits of sustainability that we're building into our products and spending all this energy on to consumers so that they're aware and can choose and help put more pressure on the company to transform us towards all of these bold goals that we've achieved? So I think really thinking again systemically about that culture shift and how to create the right incentives to create the action and the results and that impact that we know we all need to make right now.
Great. Thank you. Okay, over to Katie. We've talked a lot about McDonald's reach. It is amazing. You said you serve 65 million people a day. You've got tens of thousands of community-based restaurants around the world, not to mention all the Fisher families, the bakeries, the ranchers, all the other suppliers that bring ingredients into your restaurants and beyond. And we've talked a lot about the opportunity for you to use this amazing web of connections with the face-to-face contact with that many people every day and the relationships with your suppliers, not to mention your franchisees. You have the most amazing network of institutions that it's all about inspiring and mobilizing them to do things that they might not do otherwise. So when you leave this COP, can you give us an example of one thing that you are really going to focus on and using and leveraging those relationships to move the world, no pressure, in the right direction?
Everyone. The first thing I do when I get back to Washington, where I'm based, is to get with David to talk about the agricultural sector, because I do think we have an urgent need to get a better understanding of how to grow things, produce things, and ranch things more sustainably around the world as the global population grows and the global food supply chain needs to grow along with it. And I think McDonald's, with our network across those franchisees and suppliers, can be contributing a lot to that conversation, but also in driving change, like scaling up our regenerative ranching programs. But I'm really eager to find ways to bring our consumers along with us on this journey and inspire them that so as we make changes, they understand why, and they're incentivized and mobilized to take action in their own lives. We're such an iconic consumer brand around the world. We serve 80% of the world's population in any given year, And I think that gives us a consumer connection that we should be able to leverage to drive greater awareness around climate change and its impacts. One step we just took that is promising on that front is listening to our consumers. We made a commitment to change all of our Happy Meal toys to sustainable materials to drastically eliminate the use of plastic across Happy Meal toys. We sell 1 billion Happy Meals a year, so we're the largest toy procurement engine. And we gave our consumers credit for that, for their insights that led to that decision. And as we transition also to sustainable packaging, we want to showcase to them directly how that small change they're making with their purchase is catalyzing a big push towards more innovative materials around the world. So I think that's our short-term opportunity is really working to get on the playing field with the public sector and our competitors all around the world on the agricultural issues. And the second is to really figuring out how to energize our consumer base around that.
One thing I love about this panel is we've got two leading corporations in the world flanked by two public officials and one pesky NGO. But I love this conversation because there is this amazing intersection between the private sector and the government and how it sets policies. And I know for both McDonald's and for HP that intersection is profoundly important, and those conversations are profoundly important as well. So I want to turn to you just to comment on when you come back from this COP and you meet with your team, they're going to ask you the question, so how was it? And there are a lot of things you could list, but what's the one singular message you hope to convey to your team when you get back home?
Well, I'm actually a little bit like the soccer player who comes in at the 80th minute in the game with their uniform all clean and everyone else is out on the pitch and they're covered in mud and they're exhausted. So I think the thing I'm going to say to them is thank you, because they've been working at this nonstop for 9 months and beyond. So kind of building on everything that everyone else has said, we can't do this alone. No one leader does this all by themselves. It is an incredible team effort. And from the folks who put up our pavilion here, who helped to write every document, to prepare all those cabinet secretaries, to really think of ourselves as one U.S. government team when we're a huge entity, is an incredible accomplishment. And it's mostly because everyone here felt a sense of urgency and sort of this is the moment. And I think for them to recognize how much they each contributed is a really important thing, and will help to motivate them to keep going, because as we know, this is just the beginning. We have 10 years now of really good hard work ahead of us. So I think building that sense of camaraderie, of teamwork, and of accomplishment, and gratitude for all the hard work and sacrifices that people made will be really, really important.
Great, thank you. Okay, David, you have the last word. You're more oriented to what happens in America at home, and also the actions of American institutions and the American people. And I think we all know that climate change is an interesting political issue at home in terms of the different parties and the positions they have. But cutting through all that, if you think about leaving here and going back home and inspiring Americans to do more, American institutions, what's the message you want to deliver?
I'm going to go back on Sunday, inspired by everything that's going on here, and reminding our group in the White House that. And let me say, we've had our head down since January 20, trying to undo what happened in the last 4 years and make progress on the president's agenda. And it feels like there's an inflection point right now here at the COP where we've kind of got got things under control in the federal government, and it's time to reach out. So I love talking here. To Katie and I are going to follow up, and Jed Daly is out there, American Forest. We're going to follow up. We're going to follow up with you, right?
Oh, I plan to be part of that conversation.
Okay. Yes. No, it's a, and I will say, regretfully, because climate is impacting the United States as much as it is every other country in the world right now, with the extreme heat, with the floods, with the wildfires, whatever, we have America's attention in a way we've never had it before. We have a president that's there, and now the job is doing what the COP is trying to do, which is bring all of society into the equation. And I'm going back to Washington with excitement that we can broaden the universe here of what we're trying to do, what the president's trying to do, and make it meaningful to everybody in the U.S., just like the COP is trying to do for the world.
That is a great note to end on. I'll just say this has been a great conversation. I can imagine continuing it tonight, maybe over a glass of wine, but it could go on forever. It's been such a great pleasure to be with all of you, just your personal stories, your insights, your conviction, and the lessons learned about leadership, because leadership, as we know, actually matters a lot. And I thank you all for sharing your personal stories and everything else. And thank you all, the audience, for joining us, particularly those who are watching from afar. Thank you again. Please join me in thanking our panelists for so much wisdom.